welcome to another episode of the Indie Author Mindset Podcast. I am Adam Croft, as I usually am. This podcast is gratefully sponsored by Ingram Spark, which allows you to get your paperbacks and hardbacks into over 40,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. Get started today with them at ingramspark.com. Now, thank you for those of you who have stuck with me after my whinges and rants last week. I'll try and keep a lid on it this week. One of those weeks, I think it was. I've been looking through the news, and one of the things which will affect indie authors, and particularly anybody who publishes via Amazon, is that VAT changes on books in Germany as of the 1st of July. So the day this podcast comes out on general release, as of today, paperbacks and ebooks will have their VAT rate drop from 7% to 5%. Now, this doesn't sound like a whole lot, and for your ebooks it will make absolutely no difference because you set a price inclusive of taxes, but for your KDP paperbacks, things are different. You set your list price excluding VAT, and Amazon will automatically add the applicable VAT rate to your selected list price. So your paperback price, retail price, will have changed as of today in Germany. So if you want your prices to still end in a nice round 99 or 95 at the end, you're going to need to go in and change those. You don't need to change your KDP ebook, only your KDP paperbacks. What's even more annoying is that this VAT drop of 2% only lasts until December the 31st. So as of January the 1st, you're going to have to go in and change your prices again. Thank you very much to the German government for that one. The other thing I noticed in the news this week was an article in the New Publishing Standards saying that the US audiobook market value has gone up by 16% last year, and that unit sales of audiobooks are also up by 16%. Sounds good, right? Actually, it's slightly better than that. The article says that this double-digit growth has been in place now for 8 successive years, which is obviously good news and pretty outstanding, actually. But dig a little bit deeper and you'll find out what's really going on. I mean, double digits it sounds impressive, but consider that ebooks has triple-digit growth for many years. The publishers panicked about this. They thought their paperbacks, their hardbacks would be history. They thought they would hand everything over to Amazon, so they jacked up their ebook prices, which is why now when new books, new titles from traditionally published authors come out, the ebook is often published at $9.99 or even up to kind of $20 sometimes for an ebook, which is ridiculous. They do this to stop people buying the ebooks, to make sure that they then go and buy the paperbacks, the hardbacks, and they can get their coveted chart positions that nobody gives a tuppenny toss about anyway. Indies then filled that gap because the market for ebooks was still there. You can't tell people what they want to buy. People still wanted to buy ebooks. They still wanted them at a reasonable price. That's when indies came in. We filled that gap, and we now enjoy that huge triple-digit growth while the publishers are scrambling desperately and going to the wall. So there's a lesson for you. Don't ignore the wind direction. You can't change it. Another thing that's worth pointing out is that the results in this survey are from the publishers. They're the ones who have provided that information that they're seeing double-digit growth. The indie market wasn't asked, and the only retailer, it seems, that was consulted was Audible. Because, of course, everybody knows the only audiobook player in town is Audible. Not the case. I, like many other authors who have their audio wide, I've seen a 400% year-on-year growth in my audio sales, and almost all of it is outside of Audible. So, basically what's happening is the audiobook market hasn't gone up by 16%. The traditional publishers are seeing their sales on Audible go up by 16%. Those of us who are wide with our audio, who are smart and indie, are actually seeing that triple-digit growth that ebooks were in the early days to 400% in my case. Just to put a little bit of transparency on those figures for you. The other concerning issue for indies in the news this week was that Lulu, they've managed to knacker up an update to their platform in April majorly, and it's still not fixed. People are still having problems with it. They're seeing lost sales, lost books, covers, projects, even entire accounts having gone missing. I would say if you're with Lulu, if you're even considering it, don't. I would have said that before April anyway. Lulu is massively old hat. It's been virtually defunct for years. I would, of course, recommend using Ingram Spark for your paperbacks and hardbacks, and to go direct to retailers or D2D for ebooks. And when I recommend Ingram Spark, by the way, I'm well aware they're a sponsor of the podcast, but I will recommend them anyway. I did do long before they sponsored the podcast, and any sponsors I have are ones that I ask to sponsor the show. I don't accept unsolicited advertising or sponsorship. I will only take people that I would recommend anyway, and the guys at Ingram Spark know damn well that I'm perfectly happy to be the first one to criticise or say when they do something wrong, but it's extraordinarily rare that they do, I'm happy to say. The fourth item I wanted to talk about, and we're rattling through quite a few of these now, is the biggest one. It's the one that I wanted to get to. It's a report that Ally have put on their blog, the Alliance of Independent Authors. And by the way, if you're not a member of Ally, I would highly, highly recommend it. Massive, massive value from that. Head over to croft.link/ALLI if you're interested in joining. They've had a report essentially on, it starts off with the history of the indie publishing industry and self-publishing, and then it goes on to recent growth and how things are moving forward and what we can expect to see, all of the facts and figures, which probably won't interest anybody, but I summarised it all for you because it does affect everybody. The growth we're seeing in the indie publishing wing of the industry is still exponential. Every year's growth is carried over into the next year's growth, and it seems to just stack that curve, that steep curve that we're all very familiar with now after the coronavirus crisis. We all know now, even if we didn't before, the difference between exponential growth and linear growth. The indie publishing industry in 2016 alone was worth $6 billion, and that's 4 years ago now. And some interesting things that I pulled out of this, which just shows how backwards the traditional wing of things is and how they still don't get it, and they still aren't paying attention to what readers actually want. They don't give a damn. Women now are 67% of the top indie titles. Let that sink in. So 2/3 of the best-selling indie books are written by women. Clearly, the market prefers books written by women. Excellent, fantastic. In traditional publishing terms, only 39% of traditionally published authors are women. So 2/3 of the books sold are women, but only 1/3 of the authors in traditional publishing. So they've still got no idea what they're doing over on that side of things. Perhaps they should pay a little more attention to the direction things are going in. They can see quite easily that clearly women authors are far more popular. They should be taking on more of those women authors, because we can see in the meritocracy that is indie publishing, where there are no gatekeepers and the best books sell, the weakest ones don't. It's quite easy to see actually the direction things are going in. More indie authors are earning $25,000 a year or more compared to traditionally published as well. The number of people who are earning a decent crust has overtaken that on the trad wing quite a little while ago, and continues to grow, whereas the money on the trad wing continues to shrink. And also, this report points out that growth in the US has stalled because the market has reached maturity there. New authors, though, are still appearing all the time, so there's more products there. Not a massively increased appeal and people wanting to buy those books. So it now is definitely the time to go wide and to go international. It says here that the USA has 312 million users online and no room to grow. And believe it or not, even though most of us might think that Germany and the UK are the next biggest markets, they're not. Indonesia has 171 million people online, Brazil's 149 million, Nigeria 126 million, bear in mind English-speaking country as well. Japan and Russia are there on the way, as are Bangladesh and Mexico. Then we get to Germany. Then the Philippines, which is due to overtake Germany this year. Then Turkey, Vietnam, Iran. Then we get down to the UK, which has just 63 million people online. So this idea that you have to be UK and US focused, even less true with every day that passes, it seems. But are people reading in those countries? Yes, that's how many people are online. Are they reading? Are they reading English language books? Yes. The biggest book fair in the world is in Egypt. 3.5 million people attended this year. And in fact, there's a list of all of the book fairs that attracted over 1 million visitors. And it is huge. Algeria, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Calcutta, their international book fairs all had over 2 million visitors last year. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Argentina, Thailand, Cuba, Sri Lanka, India, Oman, India. Again, these are all bigger markets, bigger book fairs than the ones that we see as the big ones, like the London Book Fair, like Frankfurt. But we've got that UK, European, US-centric mindset, which we really need to shake, because that is not what's actually going on. Follow the data, follow the numbers. Things are going even more worldwide. Kobo Plus is launching its subscription service in Canada and in France. Audiobook growth that is showing is happening. It's actually very, very evenly split in the US and the UK. They've split it into 6 age groups, and the numbers, the percentage of people listening to audiobooks is almost exactly equal in all of them. And the reason that's important is because readers in general tend to veer towards the older. Younger readers coming in is a little rarer. So what happens when those older readers do inevitably die? With audiobooks, the age split is very, very even, and it does seem to have a much younger slant than ebooks, so maybe that's somewhere to be looking at investing for the future. The growth of the print market as well for indie publishers was approximately 17% over the last few years. Vanity press publishers, thankfully, their share of all books published on Amazon in 2007 was 73%. Now it is just 1%. Thankfully, we have kicked those vanity presses and those vanity publishers into the long grass, and they are suffering massively. Dropped from 73% market share to 1%. Thank God for that. I think that was all I had to cover on there. Other than the fact that the coronavirus pandemic has clearly changed things as well. Things like that, crises and major international issues, do tend to highlight where the cracks are in a weak model, and they will tend to boost a strong one. And the fact that we've seen the indie wing of the market, the wide wing of the market, see such massive growth, whereas those who are kind of Amazon only or US, UK only, or even further back than that on the traditional wing of the industry, they're the ones that are starting to struggle a little bit, and where those cracks are starting to show up. So there we go. I think I've said enough of that. I think I've been pushing that agenda perhaps a little too hard. I'm going to do for you this week, we didn't have one last week, I'm going to do one this week, an indie author mindset ninja tip. Steer clear of vanity presses and be cautious of service providers. Now, this is going to get me some flack, but I don't care. We had a post in the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group earlier this week, which I was reminded of when I spoke about vanity publishers a few moments ago there. It was from Laurie Sanders Burkhart, and she said she's been quoted by a small husband and wife publishing team that uses smashwords. She asked if they were the sort of outfit she should steer clear of, and she said, and this was a bit of a giveaway at the end of her post, she said the prices seem reasonable. My advice is simple. Do not use anybody who charges you to publish your book. Now, there are reasons for that, and I'm well aware there are ethical providers who will say, well, look, I can take care of the editing, the cover design, we can do all that. You don't need to do anything. You can just enjoy the book sales, pay us, we'll get it out there, we'll cover that side of things. They're called publishers, and they pay you. If your book is good enough to sell and somebody wants to take on the editing, the marketing, the cover design, let them pay you for the right to have access to sell that book. That is the whole point of a publisher. A publisher that you pay is not a publisher, it's a vanity press. And as we've seen, they've dropped from 73% of the market on Amazon to 1%. There's a reason for that as well. And you can do all these things yourself. You can find your own cover designer, you can find your own editor. It's not difficult. Go on a website like Readsy, ask in the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group. People are always more than happy, more than willing to offer advice and recommendations. You don't need an all-encompassing service provider. No matter how well-intentioned they might be, it is, frankly, most of the time, a complete waste of money. And even if it's anything worse than that, it is difficult sometimes to separate the wheat from the chaff. And it's only when you're 10 grand in the hole that you know whether you're with a good company or not. So my general advice to stick to is don't pay somebody else to publish your book. Either they pay you, or you organise the different service providers, you organise the editing, you organise the cover designer, and you get everything done off your own back without paying somebody else to take care of it all for you. It's far too messy to be worrying about that, and it's an expensive lesson to learn if you pick the wrong company. Indie publishing is about doing it yourself, not literally designing your own covers, not literally doing your own editing, but finding those individual service providers yourself. Don't pay somebody else to do that for you, for crying out loud. I will be back here next week with another episode. If you've got something you want me to cover, then please do let me know. You can email podcast@indieauthormindset.com. I'm on Twitter @IAMindset. Of course, the Indie Author Mindset Facebook group as well. And if you get value from this podcast and from the community in general, then please do help us keep going by supporting us through the Indie Author Mindset Patreon program. If you join today, you can get all sorts of wonderful gadgets and gizmos and thank yous. There's a list at patreon.com/Indie Author Mindset, and you can start helping today from just $2, which could revolutionise your author career. There's all sorts of things that go up in the Indie Author Mindset Patreon group all the time. There are exclusive articles and strategies and guides that I don't post anywhere else and never will post anywhere else. They go up once or twice a week in that group as well. And lots of people are getting lots of fantastic value out of that. So the link is in the show notes, patreon.com/Indie Author Mindset. I'll be back next week, I hope, with another episode, if I haven't burst a blood vessel or had a coronary by then. And all things being well, if I am still alive, I'll see you next week. This episode of the Indie Author Mindset podcast was presented by me, Adam Croft. The Indie Author Mindset podcast is sponsored by Ingram Spark, helping you get your book into over 40,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. Get started today at ingramspark.com. The theme music for this podcast is by the Caesareans. Don't forget you can claim 50% off any Indie Author Mindset course by entering the promo code podcast at the checkout. Links are in the show notes. For more great tips and guidance, join the Indie Author Mindset group on Facebook.